Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dill, and it's time for, the biggest episode of the entire year, the final Oscar winner predictions. While we may both personally love the final nomination predictions a little bit more, these are the ones that really, really matter. These are the ones that really count at the end of the day. And I will be upfront a little bit. I am pretty under the weather right now, but nothing can stop final Oscar predictions. I gotta be here for these.
I'm not as under the weather as you are, but I am slightly under the weather too. But we're going to charge forward through this very probably long episode. Before we get into those final Oscar predictions, I want to know, Dylan, are you predicting this year more based on stats or based on gut feeling?
Honestly, it's gonna be a little bit of a mix of both. There's some categories where I'm gonna default to the age-old stats. There'll be some other categories where it's gonna be the vibe of the moment, and maybe I'll go there. And I'm really hoping that I don't find myself like catching myself throughout where I'm like, oh yeah, this reasoning for this category, and we get to another category where I'm like, well, I'm gonna go with the other reasoning, which is just bound to happen. It happens every year, and
Mhm.
I think the most fun part with today is gonna be is what categories are we gonna break from how we felt for the last 2, 3, even 12 months, and just going with the most recent wave, in which categories we really stick to things that we believed all season long.
Well, this is our job, Dylan. We challenge each other. If our logic is inconsistent, we call each other on it. I personally am going to be relying a lot on stats, but this year is very difficult to rely on stats. We have so many things that are setting us up for statistical improbabilities. A lot of stats will die this year. There's a lot of chaos up in the air right now.
Let's go ahead and dive into these final predictions. And I feel like this year calls for us to work our way up to Best Picture because I feel like a lot of these other categories are going to really influence where we end up in picture at the end of the day. So let's kick things off with the category that you're most known for, these shorts. You did a whole
Yeah.
video breaking down the nominations, which led me to do pretty good in those. So now I'm really interested to see your description of those for the win potential of all of them.
Here's the stat that I'm going off of with this one. Since 2009, all but two winning films in the live action short category were in English. And of those two non-English language winners, one of those 2 years had no English nominations, and one of them only had one other film nominated that was in English. We look at this lineup, and there's only one film that is entirely, well, 75, 80% in English, and that is Alien. It's a film about ICE deporting people who are at appointments to confirm their green card status. It's a very pressing, very relevant film for this time period right now. So not only does it have the English language angle, which so often triumphs in this category, but it also has this socially relevant political angle to it, which I've spoken to one voter who they said that they were voting for this movie purely because they thought it was a political statement to vote for it. So that's why my pick is Alien. I do think that there's a chance that Anuja could upset and defeat the English language stat because it's visible on Netflix. But to me, this is Alien way out front and everything else behind.
And that's really interesting to me because at least going back to how you described all of these shorts going into nominations period, Anuja seems like the easiest one on paper. A lot of people loved it. Shortly after the nominations, it sold to Netflix, so the visibility was out there. So this was the one I was writing with the whole time. But seeing your take on Alien and a lot of the other pundits out there in the space also going with Alien, I feel like I'm going to switch there. But I feel like it's one of those things where if everyone's going for it, especially in the shorts, those usually turn out to be the fake ones to go for that end up biting you in the butt at the end of the day. But that English language stat, it's so hard to ignore that. And it's one where I'm saying now I'm going to go with the stats, but later I know I'm going to divert from them a little bit.
Another one that is partially in English here, and looking back, we could say, if The Last Ranger were to win, we could say, well, it was about half in English. It's also a movie about a kid. It's also a movie about an animal dying. Well, not dying, but an animal being severely hurt. Those are things that are quite manipulative for audiences. So I could definitely see an angle where The Last Ranger happens. I'm sticking with Alien. I think this is a case where the easiest answer is probably the correct one. I don't often think that the live action short category is all that difficult to predict. Sometimes there's some curveballs, but a lot of the time, if there's something there that's like Two Distant Strangers, that was an easy one to predict. An Irish Goodbye, that was an easy one to predict because it correlated with Banshees of Inisherin. The Riz Ahmed one, The Long Goodbye, or even last year, the Wes Anderson. This is a category where you don't overthink it too much. You go with the one that makes the most sense. And a film in 2025 that is protesting against deportations, that makes the most sense. That's what I'm going with.
So now let's move over to Best Animated Short, where this one seems to have the biggest question marks heading into the nomination period. Now we have our final five films, but which one are you leaning towards for the win?
Well, right now, I think that this is pretty set in stone for Wander to Wonder. Despite the fact that the short categories are known for being, they don't have precursors, the animated short category actually oftentimes does have a precursor, and that is the Annie Award. Wander to Wonder won the Annie Award for Best Animated Short Film, and that is actually a pretty big deal. This year, there was a 4 out of 5 overlap between the Oscars and the Annies. The only one that they did not nominate was Magic Candies. And if you look back through Annie history, every single year that the Annies have had 3 or 4 Oscar nominees among their short films, the winner of the Oscar short has won at the Annies. Going back even further, the last time that the Oscar winner was nominated at the Annies and did not win an Annie Award was in 2005. Every other year, if the Oscar winner is at the Annies, it wins. Since Wander to Wonder is the only one of those 4 films that I mentioned before that won the Annie Award, it is out front unless it breaks a 20-year-old stat. So either Wander to Wonder wins and keeps the stat going, or Magic Candies, which was not nominated at the Annie, wins, because that's the other thing. There have been quite a few Oscar winners that were not nominated at the Annies, but none that were nominated at the Annies and lost. And the other thing, which leads me more to Wonder, not Magic Candies, is that the last time a film in a different language won the Best Animated Short category was in 1987 with The Man Who Planted Trees. Every other year from 1988 to 2023, the winner of Best Animated Short has either been in English or has had no language whatsoever. And that helps Wander to Wonder and In the Shadow of the Cypress as the only English or non-speaking films of the top 5 here. So to me, I'm heavily going to Wander to Wonder. It is a weird film. It's not a typical film that would win this award, but those stats are very strongly in its favor. And clearly, despite the fact that it's a weird movie, it won the BAFTA, it won the Annie, and it's going to win the Oscar.
From the time of the nominations episode to now, I've been between Wander to Wonder and Beautiful Men based off your descriptions of those films at those points. And as we've seen here, Wander to Wonder has won 2 major precursors. And as we have said numerous times here, stats sometimes do rule, and it looks like here the stats will. So let's go to our last shorts category, over for documentary short, where it seems like stats sometimes don't always matter here.
This category has me at a loss. I don't know what to do with documentary short. Not only are there no precursors, I mean, there's kind of a precursor with the IDAs, but that's a body that's very it's hard to say who they are. They're not documentary filmmakers. They're not critics. They're not industry members. They're just people who like documentaries. And they have a short category, which they rewarded this year to Instruments of a Beating Heart and last year to Incident. So 2 films here won the IDA. That said, I can't find an archive that goes back further. I can't see if there's any correlation between previous winners and the IDA award. So I'm tossing that in the garbage. There's nothing that we can go off of here. And none of these films outright feels like a winner or feels like a loser. I think that this category, you are going to do just as well with logic as putting all the nominees on a dartboard and blindfolding yourself and throwing a dart. But here's the logic I'm going with. In the past 15 winners, so since 2009, 8 out of 15 of those films has been English language, which benefits 4 out of the 5 nominees. The only non-English language film is Instruments of a Beating Heart, but that's just over 50%. That's not telling me anything here. One major thing to look at is that every single film in the last 15 years has been over 20 minutes, and 12 out of the last 15 have been over 30 minutes, which again is almost all of these films. We can't count any of them out based on runtime. Here's what I'm looking at. I looked through the last 15 winners and I categorized them between serious documentaries, lighter documentaries, and films that are somewhere in between. Films that are serious, but have a little bit of hope to them at the end. That's where most of the films are. The best one that fits that sort of very serious topic, but a little bit of hope at the end, is Death by Numbers, which is a film about the Parkland school shooting, but it's not a film about the shooting as much as it is about the survivors of that shooting, not letting it define their life and confronting the person who tried to kill them. It is hopeful in the end. It's a little bit emotionally manipulative, I would say, at times. But what it's really coming in and trying to do is making a film about life instead of about death. And that's why that's the one that I'm going with. But again, I think you could pick any of the 5 here and you could be right.
I mean, shorts are always categories where you can have very chaotic things happening. And I think if I Am Ready Warden wins, it's because of the messaging of the film and how blunt it is with what it's talking about. We've seen in the past, sometimes people do go out for that. Me, on the other hand, I'm kind of going in the opposite direction. While that is a very serious and heavy-handed topic, I'm going with the lightest one of the bunch, the funnest one of the bunch, the most carefree one of Instruments of a Beating Heart. I feel like since the nominations have come out, this is the one I've heard the most praises for from a wide sense. I've seen a lot of people love Incident the most, but they always say that film is heavy, it's deep, and it sticks with you afterwards, but not in the way that you want to feel happy about it. Where with Instruments, while yes, it is the only non-English language film of this bunch, it seems to be the funnest one, the easiest watch of the bunch. But hey, sometimes they say it goes to the worst nominee of the bunch, and I guess that would be Only Girl in the Orchestra. So any of these really can win, but split us up a little bit. I'm gonna go with Instruments of a Beating Heart.
That's definitely a good guess. The one thing that's making me feel iffy on Instruments of a Beating Heart is that even with those lighter documentaries that win, if you look at the last 15, 5 of the last 15 winners have been very lighthearted documentaries that really aren't about anything serious, but they still have something to say. They still are about a topic. Last year, The Last Repair Shop, that was still about the school system and education and funding. It still had that big topic at the core of it. Or before that, The Queen of Basketball being, it's just a biodoc of a woman who was really great at basketball, but it's still about something more. It's a feminist documentary about women competing in sports against male adversity. Those winners that are lighter, they do have a little bit more on their mind than just the surface. And that's what makes me feel iffy about Instruments of a Beating Heart. As much as I would love to see that win, I would also love to see Incident win. I am not convinced by those two. But again, could be any of the 5. I would not be surprised.
We spent enough time on shorts. Let's move into the rest of our nominations, and let's do an easy one here: Best Visual Effects. Because sure, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes did win at VES, but I mean, since last year, because I mean, this movie came out at this time last year, Dune Part 2. It's just going to win again.
Absolutely. And yes, Apes may have beat it at VES, but this shouldn't be questioned. Also, to prove VES is not the be-all, end-all, all 4 Apes movies have won VES, and all 4 Apes movies, well, 3 so far, but going to be 4, all of the Apes movies have won VES and lost the Oscar. The other thing worth noting, the Critics' Choice Award has gone for all 3 previous Apes movies, but they did not go for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. But I think this doesn't even have to be questioned. It's Dune. We know it's Dune. We can move on.
Well, let's move on to the other category where Dune Part 2 could repeat a win at and Best Sound, because this one, again, kind of like visual effects, seems signed, sealed, and delivered almost a year ago. But this year, we have so many music-focused movies in our Best Picture race. And if you ever have a music-focused movie that is in the Best Picture conversation, they're always at least alive for sound. Sometimes they're stronger, sometimes they're not, like last year with Maestro. It never won anything, but we had a movie like Oppenheimer. And this year, Dune seemed destined to kind of be like Oppenheimer, but it has faltered a little bit. And the issue, I think, really this year is what is the alternative? Emilia Perez, a complete unknown, Wicked. I mean, The Wild Robot's here, which is surprising enough, the fact that it is here, and it's the only non-music focused movie outside of Dune, so maybe that's enough votes to get it to number 2, but I still think this is one that you don't really need to overthink it. It's just Dune Part 2.
I don't think you have to overthink it, but every year we get some shocks, and this does feel like a place that something crazy could happen. So usually this category ties to an editing winner. So in the expanded era, 11 of the 20 best sound winners, and that's including when the categories were split. 11 out of 20 winners have been the same film that won best editing. And if you go to films that were editing nominees winning sound, 16 of the 20 winners in Best Sound have been editing nominees. The only exceptions are The Zone of Interest, 1917, Skyfall, and Inception. Now, could Dune join that list very easily? Yes, it definitely could. But it is worth noting that Wicked and Emilia Perez are the only editing nominations here. And while neither seems overly likely for a sound win, especially because, none of them have won sound anywhere. They won the Motion Picture Sound Editors Awards, but not in the main category because Dune took the main category. They won for music editing and for international feature. Those aren't real awards, whereas Dune has the real awards. This is a stat breaker in terms of what Dune is missing, which is its editing nomination. That said, if we look at the BAFTA correlation, 13 of the last 15 winners at BAFTA have won the Oscar, which leads to Dune's favor. This is truly a case when the easiest answer may just be the correct one. And so I think it is Dune.
I guess if something crazy happened, I think I would lean more so towards Wicked than A Complete Unknown, partially because of that editing correlation, but also partially because Wicked could be a potential spoiler in editing. So then we'll be pairing an editing win with a sound win. But I'm not overthinking it. It's just Dune Part 2.
Well, that's the thing. If we do see an upset here with Wicked or Emilia Perez, that film is winning editing. Now, one thing before we move to the next category, Dylan, you said this is the one other place that Dune could repeat its previous win. Not spoiling it yet, but I do have Dune winning one other award here.
Ooh, I'm intrigued to hear that.
You'll have to see where I go with Dune
I like the sounds
later.
of that. I like the sounds of that.
Let's move on to a category that Dune can't win because it wasn't nominated. We're going to go to makeup and hairstyling, where the substance has not only the BAFTA, not only the Critics' Choice, it also won 2 awards at the Makeup and Hairstylists Guild. And the only other thing that has won this season is Wicked, which also took one of the awards at Makeup and Hairstylists. But that said, this is just the substance. There's nothing else that can take it here. To this point, only 4 horror makeup winners have won since the category beginning in 1981. So that is An American Werewolf in London, The Fly, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and The Wolfman. And I guess you might be able to consider Poor Things to be a horror makeup nominee. You might consider Pan's Labyrinth. I don't know if I would consider those. Arguable. But monster makeup used to be a lot more prevalent in the category with stuff like The Lord of the Rings, with the ones that I just mentioned, all of those horror movies, but there used to be a lot of monster makeup that won. But it seems like lately we've been going much more towards actor transformations, stuff like Bombshell or Vice or The Whale. But yeah, this is the substance, and maybe we're setting a trend for years to come with cool makeup instead of just like, we made Gary Oldman look like Winston Churchill.
Well, that's the thing, though. Substance is an actor transformation. We made Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley look like that. And like, yes, this is a horror film, but the fact that this got embraced from top to bottom shows that there's going to be a portion of this branch who is looking at it at that way. And we'll talk more about this when we get to actress. Usually our makeup winner, at least historically, especially for what you just said, matches up to an acting win. And if we have substance here, does that mean we have Demi Moore above the line? more for that in a little bit. But yeah, even when
Yeah.
Substance wasn't a guaranteed Best Picture, this win seemed very likely as long as it got nominated. And the fact that it got nominated, it got so many above the line nominations, it's a lock. And like the only other thing maybe would be Wicked, but no, like if Wicked wasn't to happen, it would have happened at BAFTA or Critics' Choice.
It's interesting that at one point we thought the substance would just be RRR, but with makeup instead of with song, or Godzilla minus one, where it just is so powerful in one category, but can't make it anywhere else. But now it's this five nomination juggernaut. Now, one other thing that I'll mention before we move on, the substance has both Critics' Choice and BAFTA, and there has only been three instances in all of history because Critics' Choice has only been awarding this category since 2009, but there's only been three incidents where the winner of both BAFTA and Critics' Choice has lost the Oscar. That is Elvis a couple of years ago, which should have been a lock with that. And before that, American Hustle, which was not nominated for the Oscar but won the BAFTA and the Critics' Choice, and Alice in Wonderland, which was not nominated for the Oscar but won the BAFTA and the Critics' Choice. So Elvis is really the only example of a Critics' Choice BAFTA winner in makeup losing the Oscar. Let's move to production design, another very easy category because Wicked has everything. It has the Critics' Choice, it has the BAFTA, and it has the Art Directors Guild. There are two movies that won everything and then lost the Oscar. That is Babylon and Inception. And it's crazy that Babylon won the BAFTA. All Quiet couldn't even win the BAFTA. When it swept, Babylon took that, and then All Quiet won the Oscar. And then Inception losing to Alice in Wonderland is another crazy one. We're not going to see that this year. It's Wicked, Wicked, Wicked for production design.
I mean, honestly, even before Wicked blew up to be this massive Best Picture player, production design always seemed very strong for a nomination, if not in win consideration. And then you throw into the fact that Nathan Crowley has been a guy working in this industry for so long. I think I read this is his eighth or ninth nomination. He's yet to win. The stars have aligned. He's got it this year. And I'll be very intrigued to see, will For Good follow that Dune Part 2 path, or can he still get in for like a repeat?
The Wicked text can repeat for nominations, but they won't win. And costumes should also be good because we're talking about that one next, which Wicked also has everything. Critics' Choice, BAFTA, Costume Designers Guild. But of course, we should look at, is there a possibility that this is upset? And there are no movies that have won all three of those awards and then lost the Oscar. The closest is Jackie, which won the Critics' Choice, won BAFTA, but did not win the Costume Designers Guild. That year, the winner was Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and that one did not have a single award. It didn't even win Costume Designers Guild, where there are three possible categories to win. So 2016 is the only anomaly in the costume design category. Every other year, the winner has had something. And this year, Wicked has everything. It's no question, it's winning.
Yep, and with both of these Wicked categories, the alternatives, the exception to the rule that has broken the stats here, have been films that struggled above the line in terms of either nominations or wins. Wicked, it's not going to have that issue this year. Wicked is a much stronger film than the alternatives in these categories, where like All Quiet was stronger than Babylon. Jackie didn't do anything on Oscar night, showing that they clearly didn't love that movie.
Now, in the best song category, this is one that I know a lot of people out there are holding out hope for an Emilia Perez loss, but hate to break it to you, it is not happening. El Mal has the two major precursors and is in a picture nominee tied to a supporting actress win. Maybe you could give credence to a possibility of, if Emilia Perez is slipping that bad, this could be the year that Diane Warren wins. She does have both guilds. The Journey from the 6888 did win the Society of Composers and Lyricists. It also won the Hollywood Music and Media Award over the Emilia Perez songs. But that said, Golden Globe, Critics' Choice, that is a ironclad duo. I went back in time and tried to figure out how many times through history has the Golden Globe Critics' Choice joint winner lost. And there's only two times that that's happened. 2008, The Wrestler by Bruce Springsteen from The Wrestler won both Globes and Critics' Choice and did not win the Oscar. And in 2004, Old Habits Die Hard by Mick Jagger from the movie Alfie won both Globe and Critics' Choice and did not win the Oscar. Now, can you tell me, Dylan, off the top of your head, what is the similarity between those two songs?
Well, I believe neither of them got nominated for the Oscar.
Bam. Neither of them were nominated for the Oscar. Never has a Golden Globe Critics' Choice joint winner lost the Oscar if nominated. El Mal, congratulations. There's your win. Unless Emilia Perez really slipped that bad, which we'll talk about later. I don't think it did. But that said, this is probably the closest Diane Warren has come to a win since Till It Happens to You. Probably the closest she's come.
Well, here's the thing. I don't even think Diane Warren's number two in the category. I think if El Mal happened to lose, it's the name check of Elton John. I think the fact that he got the nomination clearly shows people will just name check because they love the artist. And if for some reason El Mal didn't walk away with this, and then if for some reason Mi Camino didn't walk away from this, then I guess it would go to Elton John. But I mean, I think the biggest thing working in El Mal's favor is the fact that it's tied to Zoe Saldana. And the fact that if you're watching Emilia Perez, if you're maybe voting for Zoe Saldana and supporting actress, her clip is El Mal. The thing that most people talk about from her performance is this song. And then the fact that if you're going to go like, well, the backlash of this movie, I'm going to stay away from the song, but I'm still maybe going to vote for an actress, a supporting actress that is, then that just doesn't work. And like I said before, if they're not going to vote for Emilia Perez due to controversy, I think they're just going to look for the name that stands out the most. And sure, Diane Warren has friends in the branch for the nomination. Clearly, after 20 some years, she doesn't have enough friends to get a win. And I think the Academy at large is going to see Elton John and be like, hey, that's my guy. But I still think it's one of the Emilia Perez songs, with El Mal being the much more favored one.
There's really no point arguing what's number two. I do just think that winning those guilds does show a little bit of love for Diane Warren outside of her bubble. Also, the song being sung by her, she's clearly an awards darling. She won for Fight for You out of absolutely nowhere. That was a complete shocker win. And the fact that this song is actually it's out there in the world. I mean, if you watch the SAG Awards last weekend, the In Memoriam montage was to Diane Warren's song from the 6888. So there's really no point arguing what is number two, but I do think that if Diane Warren were to win for something, it would be this, but it's just not this year.
Well, song seems pretty locked up, and I guess we can kind of say score is too, because the frontrunner all season long missed the nomination being challengers, and like Challengers has won every award it's been nominated for. So we had to go to BAFTA. Hey, we have all of our nominees besides away from the category. What wins there? The Brutalist did. So using your logical thinking, seems that Brutalist should win here at the Oscars. And that is my personal pick. But I think if we're going to have any insane upset that we are not expecting whatsoever, it's here. And it's not the Brutalist. It's not Conclave. It's not Emilia Perez. It's not the Wild Robot. They've all faced each other before. The random winner would come from Wicked. People being like, oh my gosh, I love the music of Wicked. This is the category I can reward it for, even though there is no real score. The fact that it's here, I think it has that possibility, but I'm not predicting it. You have to go with the BAFTA winner.
Here's the thing, though. We have seen over and over and over the Brutalist has struggled with American groups. It is not performing well with American groups whatsoever. In fact, the only guild win out of all of the guilds, the only one guild win that the Brutalist has is in score. It's the only guild win out of every single category. I am going with the Brutalist. I think it's vulnerable everywhere. Everywhere. It is vulnerable for Brody. It is vulnerable for cinematography. I don't even think it's really in the race for director at this point. It is vulnerable everywhere, and it is vulnerable in score, especially if Conclave is picking up more than we expect it to. Conclave could happen here. Additionally, Emilia Perez does have a couple of guild wins in terms of its music. Brutalist makes the most sense. It is my favorite in the category. I'm going to go with that. But here's some numbers to run quickly. Since 2009, BAFTA has had 12 out of 15 of the same winners. They missed The Social Network, they missed Life of Pi, they missed Black Panther. But in the 3 years that BAFTA was wrong, Black Panther was out of nowhere, had no precursor wins beforehand. Life of Pi had the Globe, and Social Network had the Globe and Critics' Choice Award. Because Golden Globe and Critics' Choice are out of the conversation this year, we do have to look at years where the BAFTA was the only award that a film had before winning. And that has happened with All Quiet, with The Grand Budapest Hotel, Babel, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Those are the only 4 times that BAFTA is the only award that a score won before the Oscar. It adds to a very small group of films if The Brutalist wins. But that said, there's nothing to say that The Brutalist won't win here unless you just expect The Brutalist to blank everywhere, which I'm kind of leaning towards. There's a possibility that before the Oscars, I could switch my vote here to Conclave and go with that instead. But I'm gonna trust my heart, and I'm gonna go with The Brutalist here.
I would go with Wicked before I would go with something like Conclave, which has had the opportunity to win, has had the opportunity at a place that gave it best film. They still didn't give it score.
Yeah, and that is a really good point. BAFTA did love Conclave, and they didn't give it score there, and that's where that could have shown some strength. But evidently, The Brutalist was also really loved at BAFTA. It was probably second place for best film. Looking at that race, it was probably quite close in a lot of categories. It's all hypotheticals. We don't know that for sure. But if we're assuming that The Brutalist is weaker here than it is, with the BAFTAs, then it's possible that it could lose. It's not worth betting against, but if we're looking at the categories that could have a surprise upset, that could go somewhere completely random, this is one.
Well, we've had a bunch of categories where we've had a pretty clear-cut winners. We only have one different from each other, and that's over in the shorts category. So why don't we dive into our first real battle of the night, Best Animated Feature, where the season kicked off. Flow won big at the Golden Globes. Then The Wild Robot came back pretty strong. Critics' Choice, PGA, Annie. And then we had the BAFTAs going over with Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul. So those are clearly our top three. But I would say that the BAFTA write them off this year for Animated Feature. That's Homegrown Love, Wallace and Gromit. Hasn't won anywhere else. If that maybe had won at like Annie for a specific category or at the Critics' Choice, I would say, yeah, give it more love. But here, it's Flow versus The Wild Robot.
It is Flow versus the Wild Robot, and the Wild Robot makes more sense, but something in me, something deep down feels like the tide is shifting in the Academy. We might be seeing people taking animation a little bit more seriously. I want to predict Flow. I really want to, but I can't. So since 2009, just running the stats, BAFTA has had 12 out of 15 right, while PGA 11 out of 15, CCA 12 out of 15, Golden Globe 12 out of 15. So all of these precursors are very good, and they are all very good because they mostly line up perfectly. 8 out of the last 15 winners have been a sweep in the animated film category. Something worth noting, there has never in the entire history of the award, there has never been an Annie indie winner to win Best Animated Feature. The last independent film to win the Oscar was, I guess you could say, Spirited Away, if we're considering Studio Ghibli to be indie. Last year, Boy and the Heron, that was clearly not an independent film at that point. Whether Spirited Away was in 2002, that's up to you. I do think the tides are shifting, but I think it's also very wishful thinking to predict Flow when almost every year it is proven that most Academy members do not watch the animated films. And last year is the exception, not the rule, where the American studio film loses to a foreign language film. I think it's best to predict Wild Robot and hope for Flow. And if it's Flow, then next year we have permission to go for something crazy, something independent, something unique, different than the American studio movie. But predicting Flow off of 1 year of change, which also was Miyazaki, I can't predict Flow in good conscience right now, even though I want to.
I mean, we said the top of this video, are we going more of stats or are we going more of vibes? And this is a category where it applies the most to me because, like you said, the stats back up the Wild Robot. It has PGA, it has CCA. Granted, it doesn't have BAFTA, it doesn't have Globe, but those two bodies are very strong. Flow only has one, Wallace and Gromit has the other. But the vibes just seem like it's up Flow's alley. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong places. I barely see any promotional, any FYCs, anyone talking about the Wild Robot in the industry. Look at the vibes of the room. Everyone's talking with Flow. And on nomination morning, when Flow got that international feature nomination, it was like, oh, cool. Flow, it's got this locked up. But then Wild Robot, yeah, it missed song, but it got into sound, it got into score, it got in here, and then it followed that up with winning at the PGA and then at the CCA. So now it's like, what do we do here? And I think this is the ultimate vibe test, like you're talking about. We saw last year they were willing to divert, but that was Miyazaki. That was a film that made a lot more money, both worldwide and domestically, and it won more precursors. Flow doesn't have that, but Flow, I think also, I don't think we're given enough credit for. So the one thing that you just said there, the Academy members don't always vote themselves in this category. They'll ask their kids. I feel like if you put Wild Robot and Flow in front of a kid, the kid's gonna like Flow more than Wild Robot.
So why does the Wild Robot have hundreds of millions of dollars, and Flow has been seen by like no children whatsoever.
I mean, that is a great question. You could say release strategy, you could say studios behind them, but I think if you sat them both down and you tell them at the end, what movie do you like more? The robot movie or the cat movie? I feel like it would lean more towards Flow. And I think that again, some Academy members, they don't have kids. They have pets. And their pets are gonna pick Flow. Your cat and my cat. These cats sit in front of the TV. They watch it. Whenever my girlfriend and I leave the apartment and we don't want the cat to be here by himself, we put on Flow and he sits there. He doesn't move. He is glued to the screen. Is this backwards thinking? Am I putting myself into a corner to pick the movie I want to see win? Yeah, but I'm going vibes here. I'm going Flow, and I'm willing to take this L. But I think the vibes are here where I can totally see them open up the ballot and be like, the winner's Flow. I just feel like something's missing in the Wild Robot campaign. I know it has the nominations to back it up. I just don't feel like the word of mouth buzz is out there. And again, I could be looking in the wrong places, but I feel like wherever you go to, everyone's raving about Flow. And I feel like Wild Robot's time kind of came and passed.
A lot of your argument is completely speculative, which is fine because we're Oscar predicting there's no answer until the envelope is opened up. It's Schrodinger's box with every single category. The answer is true and false until that envelope is opened. Now, the thing that I go against here, I said all along, if Flow wins Golden Globe and BAFTA, it wins the Oscar. It lost the BAFTA, which means I cannot, in good conscience, put it for the Oscar. The thing I didn't expect is that The Wild Robot also lost the BAFTA. And we can question, we can speculate, would Flow have won if Wallace and Gromit was not there, if there was not a home field advantage? But we don't know that. The other thing is, when we look at regional critics should be the ones going for Flow like crazy, right? It's an independent animated movie. That's the type of thing that critics should be boosting like no other film, saying, look at this, you need to go and see it. This is important, this is special. And yet, The Wild Robot has basically double the regional wins than Flow in the animation category. That's crazy to me. And it just shows that I think that the love for Flow is a small bubble of people who are really enthusiastic about this film's success. Unfortunately, I think that it's much more likely that there's a lot of people that just don't care about this category and are going to go with the one that they heard about in theaters.
That's completely fair. Animated feature, it's a race between two films, and where we have precursors to really help us out, though. Our next category, precursors don't really help us because it's documentary feature, where we have 5 films nominated here, and only 2 films have won a real precursor, and one of those films was ineligible for like half of the precursors. So you kind of have to throw them out or put a little asterisk next to the ones that they did lose.
It's also a question of like, what are the precursors here? Because I would say that while a lot of those stuff like the Indie Spirit, IDA, Cinema Eye, I think they're very useful in predicting nominations, they're less useful in predicting wins. And I think the only things that we really should be looking at for a win is BAFTA, PGA, DGA. A few weeks ago would have said No Other Land is definitely happening because it's going to get the BAFTA, but it didn't get the BAFTA. Now, it has not won a single thing worth a damn. We have not seen anywhere proof that No Other Land is able to get wins. Now, that said, it was apparently ineligible for PGA and DGA, which I wasn't aware of before, and it does change things a little bit. But that said, the only film of the 5 that we have nominated here with an industry award is Porcelain War, which is a Ukraine war documentary. I will just say this up front. I think within Hollywood and within the United States at large, I think that Ukraine is a topic that a lot more people agree on than Palestine. No Other Land is a pretty inoffensive film in how it handles that topic. And so I don't think that's necessarily going to turn people away as much as Porcelain War might bring people in who are really, really like Ukraine is the #1 topic for them at this point. It is an interesting race because so few films have precursors here. No Other Land and Black Box Diaries had the BAFTA nomination, but they both lost. At PGA, Porcelain War was the only nominated film here. And then we had Porcelain War, Sugarcane, and Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which were DGA nominated. And of course, Porcelain War won. Although No Other Land has narrative and an important subject, clearly it's been struggling to get votes in the industry at large. If it couldn't win BAFTA, I don't know why I would believe that it's going to win here. I was wondering how many times has a documentary won the Oscar without taking either BAFTA, DGA, or PGA. And it's happened 3 times in the last 15 years, being Icarus, 20 Feet from Stardom, and Undefeated. So I don't know what to do. I struggle to see No Other Land winning because I feel like it would have won something at this point if it was going to win. I also struggle to see Porcelain War because I don't think that that has a ton of passion despite having those guild nominations and wins. So I'm going to call a surprise win here. I'm going to go with Sugarcane because what I noticed looking back through the past 15 winners, if there's a film released by one of the big distributors, I'm talking Netflix, Disney, some of those other big boys, they usually win. And Sugarcane was released by National Geographic under Disney. So, in a year as splintered as this, I'm going to take a Disney distributed film over a film that was self-distributed, over a film that was distributed by Picture House Entertainment, over a film that was distributed by Kino Lorber. Black Box Diaries was MTV, so maybe there's an angle for that. But right now, I think that the money is going to decide this one, and I'm going Sugarcane.
I think what this category ultimately comes down to is if you, as a predictor, would believe that if No Other Land was eligible for PGA, if it was eligible for DGA, would have got nominated, it would have had won. And if your answer to either of those questions is no, you look elsewhere. You look to Porcelain War, you look to Sugarcane, you look to Soundtrack, you look to Black Box Diaries. If your answer is yes, I think you still go with No Other Land. And that's where I'm currently leaning towards. I think if it was eligible, I think it would have got the nomination, and maybe it still lost, but maybe it still won. Maybe this is the reverse logic of the last category where I had like, well, the vibes are of No Other Land and not the stats with some of these other films. It's just like, I don't know. I just don't feel like I've seen much conversation around Porcelain War. And I think honestly, like you said at the top of this category, that is the issue that people care most about and are most wanting to get up to reward. We've seen the last 2 years in this category, they've gone with Ukraine docs, and you could make it 3 straight years. And I think if you go to some of the other films, like Soundtrack from a Coup d'Etat is the one that most people say is the most cinematic of the bunch. Maybe they want something flashy in your face. They go that way. Black Box Diaries is maybe the most artistic achievement of the bunch, and then Sugarcane has the biggest push behind it. I feel like all 5 of these films has a very logical angle. What I think the ultimate decision is coming down to is we have 5 films nominated. You need 21% of the vote. I think even if 50% of the category doesn't want to watch No Other Land, the other 50% of voters that do watch it, only 21% of them need to put that at their number one. And I think that's enough for this category this year without another film having multiple major wins or multiple major nominations across all of these bodies.
I guess part of what I'm going for here with picking Sugarcane is that I think visibility is going to determine the winner in this category this year because since none of these films have been winning at major places, there's been no visibility for it. There's been nothing to add to like, oh, I have to go onto the screening room and check out No Other Land right now. It's been winning everything. When I think of who has the money for FYC ads, when I think of who has the money to bring in the directors to do talks, it's not No Other Land, it's not Porcelain War, it's Sugarcane. But like documentary short, I do kind of think you could put a blindfold on and throw a dart, and that's your winner. This is going to sound really stupid if No Other Land was the winner all along.
And I think that's the fun thing of predicting this year is I hate the years where of our 22 categories, you know the winner of 20 of them up front. This year, I feel like we have a lot of these categories where it's a 50-50, or in this case, a 1 out of 5 chance. And this will really make or break ballots. And I think an animated feature, Wild Robot, is the more predicted one. Here in documentary, No The Land is the more predicted one. So we're kind of trading off here where maybe you go for 2 for 2, maybe I go 2 for 2, maybe we both go 1 of 2, maybe we both go over 2. We'll have to see.
But here's the thing. I think that your logic has stayed consistent with both categories because you're going with the vibes both times. And the vibes say flow, the vibes say No Other Land. I'm a little bit more going towards the belief that money is going to determine these categories and not passion.
Well, that's the fun thing because our next category, I'm breaking away from vibes. I'm going towards that money because we have international feature. We have one film that's got an international feature every precursor, Emilia Perez. We have 2 films that are in our best picture race for the first time ever. And yeah, maybe the vibes are more towards I'm Still Here. It's shocked with the nomination. People are watching it. They're saying how much they love it. They're saying, oh, I wish Fernanda Torres could win in the actress category. Maybe she still can. But I feel like Emilia Perez built up way too much of a lead. It's been getting buzz all year long, and it has has secured multiple wins. It's not like, to go back to this animated feature debacle that we have, it's not like Wild Robot's winning sound. It's not like it's winning score. Amelia Perez is winning at least one, if not two or more other categories. And I just don't feel like there's enough passion to really pull away here because, like, sure, you could say the same argument I use for documentary. If we have 100% of voters, we have five films. Again, in this category, I feel like there's really only two, maybe three films that are pulling much of the weight, but I still don't feel like if there's a voter out there who's like, oh, I really don't want to see Amelia Perez win, are they all going to vote for I'm Still Here? Or will some go to Flo, some go to Fig, some go to Girl with the Needle? While in those other categories, it's a clear one or two.
With all the love in the world to our Brazilian friends out there who I know are watching, probably cursing us right now, all the love in the world. I don't think the vibes are with I'm Still Here at this moment. I just think that there's a lot of passion from fans. What we have seen is Amelia Perez has won everything. Even after I'm Still Here was nominated at the Oscars, I'm Still Here has still not been able to beat Amelia Perez anywhere. Now, if you are not going for Amelia Perez in international feature and you are going for I'm Still Here, you are depending on two things. Thing one is that the controversy has damaged the film enough to take voters away from Amelia Perez, which we have not seen any proof of. It has won everything that it's supposed to win still. At BAFTA, it didn't take any wins away from it. You know, it's still won international and it's still won Zoe Saldana. And we still believe Zoe Saldana is winning. She also won at the SAG Award. Clearly, evidently, there's not enough to take away the guaranteed wins from Amelia Perez. Now, the other thing that you're counting on if you're going I'm Still Here over Amelia Perez is that I'm Still Here's new exposure after its Best Picture nomination is enough to help it surge. If you are going I'm Still Here, you're riding on an invisible wave of support that has come in the past few weeks. But we haven't seen that anywhere. It's a risky pick. I would respect anyone that's going for I'm Still Here going for that invisible wave of support, but I just personally can't justify it. And I do believe that there's more support for I'm Still Here in the aftermath of the Oscar nominations. Unfortunately, I do not believe that voters are turning against Amelia Perez. We have not seen Amelia Perez lose any support in any of the categories that we have seen through the season.
I would agree with you there, especially for that first point, is we haven't seen it lose steam. Like, sure, you can say it hasn't overperformed. At BAFTA, there was a world where Jacques Audiard could have won director, or maybe it wins in score with the absence of challengers, but like it won the two categories it was supposed to. At SAG, the place that cares the most about narratives, they still couldn't give it to the film that they gave an all-time tire of record nominations with Wicked. They couldn't give it to Grande. They still went with Saldana. I think the biggest thing working in I'm Still Here's favor is the fact that it got into Best Picture. And it probably did that because of the abundance of number one votes. I think the issue there is Amelia Perez is another film that has an abundance of number one votes. That is the definition of a film that's all one, two, and threes, and eight, nine, tens. Amelia Perez isn't getting many five, six, sevens from people. I'm Still Here could get those from people. At the end of the day, especially when you have Amelia Perez in so many categories, 13 nominations. Well, sure, voters are supposed to watch all 10 Best Picture nominees. Some might not. Some, even though we've had international features win Best Picture, still can't get over little subtitles at the bottom of the screen. And they're like, well, Amelia Perez has 13 nominations. It's in like 9 or 10 categories. I'm voting there. And those same voters may still just go elsewhere. They may go with Flow, that a film that clearly, as we've seen before, has a lot of passion. Fig and Girl with the Needle, same there too. Those are people that really love those films, just not in a grand scale. And the biggest thing to go against Amelia Perez, if you want an I'm Still Here upset, is the fact that all the voters are going to flock to one. And maybe they will because it's another Best Picture nomination. I just think the other three films here have a lot of buzz that will all siphon a few votes away. And I still think Amelia Perez at the end of the day will get enough of the percentage vote overall to come away with this category.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything yet to make me believe that the controversy actually hurt Amelia Perez. I got torched for saying that last time. People in the comments were like, "This guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. You live in a bubble."
I will say, I think the thing that the controversy did is it didn't allow it to soar. I think it
Yeah,
cut its growth. And its growth was supporting actress, international feature, song. It could have got into director, it could have got into score as potential extra wins, and maybe the controversy stopped those, but it wasn't taking away anything it already had.
but I think the thing that I more mean is we don't know if the controversy took away any potential wins. We don't know if the film would have won editing or picture or director at BAFTA. It still won everything that it was supposed to. It just didn't get anything extra. And we don't
Hmm.
know, maybe it would not have gotten those extra wins even if the controversy never happened. We don't know. But the fact of the matter is, it has not lost anything that it was supposed to win. It just hasn't won anything that it wasn't supposed to win.
Well, speaking of wasn't supposed to win, let's go to our next category of best editing, where just like score, Challengers dominates all the precursors, the critics group, CCA, and now we have a place where we only have one precursor because Ace happens after the Oscar Awards, and Conclave took that at the BAFTAs, and I would say, not to be that guy, but when I said Challengers didn't get nominated, it's between Conclave and probably whatever film's stronger between Wicked and Amelia Perez, and I still kind of hold true to that today, where if I'm picking a winner here, most likely I'm going Conclave because of the BAFTA, but they're going with the most showy, strongest movie. Maybe it's Wicked.
I don't know about that, man. Look, the editing category is the equivalent of writing last year, where we didn't have WGA until after the Oscars. This year, we do not have the ACE Eddie Awards until after the Oscars happen. So we are missing some very crucial information because we could see maybe Conclave does not win at the ACE Eddies, and that would change the race. But right now, all we have is BAFTA because Critics' Choice went to Challengers, which is not nominated. And this is the fourth time that that's happened. Most years, the Critics' Choice winner is nominated at the Oscars. So we have to look at one stat, which is the BAFTA winner to Oscar winner overlap. In the last 15 years, in the expanded era, there has been 10 out of 15 BAFTA winners that have gone on to win the Oscar. So that's pretty good. You know, that's 66% have gone from BAFTA to the Oscar. They've missed a few. They missed Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Gravity, Dunkirk, Bohemian Rhapsody, and Dune. 4 out of 5 of those were sound winners, notably. And so if we aren't going Conclave, which has BAFTA, we have to look at winners that missed BAFTA and Critics' Choice. And there's only 2 of those, which is Dune and it's Bohemian Rhapsody. And so, of course, Conclave is our best bet. It is the only film to have won anything at this point. Now, that said, we also have to look at the sound editing Oscar link because of the past 15 winners, 10 of those 15 winners have won both sound and editing. That's 66%, same as the BAFTA link. And beyond that, 14 out of the 15 previous winners were nominated for sound. And that's why I was clinging to Amelia Perez for a while and why I still think Amelia Perez and Wicked could be a thing, because those are the only 2 films that have both sound and editing nominations. But with that said, Conclave looks like the strongest film, but are Best Picture and Best Editing a good link together? Because a lot of the time, we don't see the strongest film for Best Picture win in the editing category. In fact, in the expanded era, only 4 out of 15 Best Picture winners have also won Best Editing. But all of those movies, except for Coda and Birdman, were nominated for Best Editing. I could definitely see a world for Amelia Perez. I could definitely see a world for Wicked. I can't really see a world for Anora. I definitely can't see one for The Brutalist.
And that's kind of where I'm at too, is I do have Conclave as my winner here. And with that Best Picture overlap stat, that will be something we will address a little further when we get to that Best Picture category. But I think if they're going for the most showy editing, the most in-your-face editing, and if they're going to give a film a few extra love at this year's Academy, Wicked makes the most sense here. I think if you look at the history of editing winners, it's the film that matches up most to those. But again, I feel like Wicked should have been more prevalent in the editing scene all of that awards season. The fact that it missed out in so many places just seems weird. It's like it would be really odd for it to win here. So at the end of the day, I am going with Conclave because that film, maybe even more so than Screenplay, it relies on its edit to keep up this rhythm, to keep up this pace. So I think this can be another place to give Conclave love, even if it does not end up winning Best Picture.
There's a lot of categories so far. I mean, documentary as well. There's a lot of categories where we could get something completely out of left field. Now, you can't go with left field for every single one of those categories. And that's why I'm not going left field on this one, despite the fact that I do see a path for it.
Speaking of left field, I think that you got to give a little bit of chatter to Amelia Perez coming in here because that is another very, very, very heavily
Yes.
edited film. But that is a film that has shown up for editing all season long and has continued to lose editing all season long. Controversy aside, like this is an aspect that is clearly showy in that film. So let's give it an extra win here and be a crazy win. I would not want to see what the internet looks like after Amelia Perez wins editing.
I think that if it would have won Best Editing, it would have won at BAFTA. But that
Mm-hmm.
said, I do think Emilia Perez is closer to an editing win than Wicked. If they do call a surprise, I would expect it to be Emilia Perez.
Well, speaking of surprises, I'm not going to say what film it is, but I'm looking at your best cinematography winner. And I'll preface this by saying, heading into this season, there's been so much chatter about this category. Where do we really go with it? A lot of people out there were saying that Brutalist. I was adverse to that all season long, but I mean, looking internationally speaking, Brutalist has dominated over there. It won the BAFTA, won BSC, and then hopping over here domestically, Nosferatu won over at Critics' Choice. So it seems that most guilds are going out for the Brutalist, but I will say it's a film that doesn't look like a cinematography when you watch the film. When you hear the backstory of what went into it, it makes a lot more sense. Kind of like Oppenheimer last year, where like you look at that movie, sure, but when you hear how they made the film, you're like, oh, of course it's going to win. But I'll head over to you. What's your number one?
You're going to be happy to hear this, Dylan, because I have Dune Part 2 winning.
Oh
Despite the
yeah.
fact that I have been saying there's no way this wins all year long, because what I've kept saying is, why would they award something that's just the same as the first one? And I wasn't going to put this here. I wasn't until I learned one very crucial stat that I'll talk about in a little bit. This category should be cut and dry, but it's not. We all expected The Brutalist to clean sweep the season. And then what happened? It lost the Critics' Choice Award to Nosferatu, which everyone thought that Brutalist was going to win there. And then it
Mm.
lost the ASC award to Maria, showing that there's weakness in the American industry. How the hell do you lose to Maria when you are the Brutalist? You should be dominating. Of course, Brutalist still did win on the BAFTA, but that's not enough for me to be convinced because it's clearly struggling in the States to get these wins. Of course, also, Dune Part 2 has been struggling to get wins. It has not won a single thing yet, but it does have a visual effects nomination and it does have a production design nomination, and it's likely to win a couple of other tech awards, which is something we often see with a cinematography winner. So let's break down some stats. Let's look at BAFTA. In the last 15 years, they've gotten 11 right. ASC has gotten 9 right. So Maria, you're on the shakiest ground here. And Critics' Choice has gotten 11 out of 15 right. This year, because all of them split, we're left wondering, what the hell do we do? So there's been 3 years where all 3 have split. In 2009, BAFTA went Hurt Locker, ASC went White Ribbon, and Critics' Choice went Avatar. And of course, Avatar was the winner, so they went with Critics' Choice, which was, of course, a visual effects movie. We can draw a comparison there. 2011, The Artist won BAFTA, Tree of Life won ASC, and Tree of Life and Warhorse tied at the Critics' Choice. And the Oscar went to Hugo, which won none of the cinematography precursors. And what did that have?
Visual effects.
Visual effects. 2022, All Quiet won BAFTA, Elvis won ASC, Top Gun won Critics' Choice. And the Oscar went All Quiet, which had visual
Effects
effects.
nomination.
That is the big thing that I'm looking at here. The last time when a visual effects nominee lost cinematography to a non-visual effects nominee was in 2008, when Slumdog Millionaire won cinematography over Benjamin Button and The Dark Knight. But in the expanded era, 10 out of 15 Best Cinematography winners were nominated for Best Visual Effects, if not winning. And 8 of those 10 times, it was the only cinematography nominee that was nominated for Best Visual Effects. So that is the boost for Dune winning. On the Brutalist side, there's a director cinematography link, because 11 out of the past 15 winners have been nominated for Best Director. So using that logic, the Brutalist is most likely. But using the VFX logic, it's looking like Dune. I think it's between those two. And look, The Brutalist, it's the easy answer. And a lot of the time you might as well go for the easy answer. But if I'm looking for a big shock here, Dune feels right. And Dune is clearly flashy. It's in your face. And if people are split between the other ones, maybe the clearest, prettiest film on the surface could be the winner.
Yeah, I really like this argument here because personally speaking, Dune Part 2 should win this award. And honestly, if Dune 1 had lost the Oscar back then, we would just have a Dune Part 2 sweep this season. There would be no thoughts about it. But like I don't know. It's a very hard thing to predict something that has yet to win a single precursor, especially when a film that's dominated, at least half of the precursors are in the lineup being The Brutalist, and then the other two films that have won are here as well. And like Emilia Perez is the only other film in the category that hasn't won anything, but that doesn't have the VFX argument to its name. But I guess it technically has the director argument here, but still, Dune Part 2 has the stronger of the two, you could say. I have Brutalist here. I don't feel great about it. Is shooting on VistaVision enough to get you the win? Maybe, maybe not. But like if you're using the argument for like what went into the production, a lot of these films have that to say. Nosferatu created a whole new, brand new lens to shoot. Dune Part 2 used all this location scouting that went into the production of how to find the perfect angles for the perfect lighting for the perfect moments. And I think what you're saying about Brutalist struggling with American guilds is very true. And that's one of the reasons why I had been so low on it all award season long, is I expected to do well abroad. But here, I expected to struggle. Maybe I expected a little bit more struggling than what it has in terms of missing nominations, not just missing wins. But I just don't know at the end of the day, because I feel like if you predict Brutalist here, you kind of have to predict Courbet and director. I think it'd be very weird if Brutalist won cinematography and then you get a director later and you don't have Courbet. But where you could go with Dune Part 2 or Nosferatu or Maria in cinematography, you still could pick Courbet later. It may not make the most sense, but you still could do it. I think I'm going to just stick with Brutalist here. You mentioned before in the last category, you can't always take the risk. And this is one where I'm going to stick towards the consensus, but I would jump for joy if Dune Part 2 pulled out this upset, or even if it was Nosferatu. If one of those two ended up winning, that would make me so happy.
And granted, I mean, I keep saying that The Brutalist is weaker than we could have ever imagined. But at the same time, Dune Part 2, it's not like that's some juggernaut of a film either, right? It only has 5 nominations. It's been losing steam basically anywhere it could be. So why would it pick up an extra win if it is that weak? I just think The Brutalist is weak too. So I'm torn. I want to go for the upset in this one because I think The Brutalist is not going to win everything we expect it to.
And I think the thing that would have really tipped me to Dune Part 2 is had it won ASC. That was a spot I was predicting the upset that happened there. I had Dune Part 2 over The Brutalist in my ASC predictions, and it lost out, and it lost out of all things to Maria. I've said my Maria hate on this channel enough. I don't need to continue with that. But like, I don't know. I feel like if Dune Part 2 was going to pull this off, ASC, CCA, one of them would have came out for it. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right here.
Well, something we could look at is one of Dune's surprise wins a few years ago, which wasn't really a surprise, but with editing for Dune, it lost everywhere, everywhere. It did not win a single editing prize. Editing kept going to other films, but because it split everywhere, there was no consensus. And then at the very end of the day, Dune just slid in as the winner because it was agreeable and clearly everyone was going very firmly for other films. And so in a category that's as splintered as cinematography, where it's been going in so many different directions, I think that a non-consensus film has a chance of winning. And Dune does have some compelling arguments for me. I mean, if it's keeping its sound win, if it's keeping its VFX win, then clearly there is still support for it. And people aren't too adverse to, oh, well, we gave it this last time. I guess we'll just skip it this time. So cinematography, it can win.
Well, speaking about consensus and people agreeing on something, let's go to adapted screenplay where Conclave has his signed, seal delivered. It's won everything it's been eligible for. Golden Globe, Critics' Choice, BAFTA, USC, and if it was eligible for WGA, you can be pretty sure it would have won there as well. The fact that Conclave has won everything is arguably number 1 or number 2 in Best Picture. This one is maybe the easiest above the line category of them all.
Totally. This is a season sweeper. It only missed WGA because of eligibility being stupid. So yeah, this is winning. It's got everything. There's been one time in history where a film has won every single screenplay prize and then lost the Oscar, which was Up in the Air in 2009. Precious won with absolutely no precursors over Up in the Air. But I think it's pretty safe to say there is no clear number 2. Even Nickel Boys, which has the WGA, is so far behind Conclave. It's not like those are fighting for close spots there. It's Conclave all the way. So we can move on to the next category. It's a sweep.
Well, this category is not a sweep, even if we all kind of expect it to be a sweep, and that's original screenplay, because we have a weird split of these because the WGA went to ANORA, the Critics' Choice went to Substance, A Real Pain got the BAFTA, And no original screenplay won at the Golden Globes because the Golden Globes weren't adapted for the first time in forever, just showing how strong Conclave is. But like this year, none of these films have two precursors of the big four. And I feel like that makes for such an interesting race because Substance one win comes from the one place where there is no overlap. A Real Pain wins probably the most important of the bunch of the BAFTA, but it's not a Best Picture nominee. And then Nora won at WGA, which is the strongest film of the bunch, but honestly is not the strongest precursor, but at least comparing to BAFTA. So like, which way do you really go in this category?
I think you have to go ANORA because it's closer to the picture win. So I got curious, as I keep saying every category, I got curious and I checked the stats. I want to check how many times the picture winner has lost screenplay in the 21st century. So the 24 years of this century so far, there have been 7 films that have lost Best Screenplay and still won Best Picture. And of those 7 films, only one lost to a film that was not nominated for Best Picture. That was Gladiator in 2000, which lost to Almost Famous. Every other time that a Best Picture winner has lost screenplay to a different film, it lost to a Best Picture nominee. And then I wanted to go back even further. And I went back to the 1960s to figure out how many times the picture winner lost screenplay to a film that was not nominated for Best Picture. It's happened 3 times since the 1960s. 1960s was my cutoff because before then, there were 3 screenplay categories, not 2. But Almost Famous beat Gladiator, Sling Blade beat The English Patient, and The Usual Suspects beat Braveheart. So this is, of course, assuming that ANORA is our frontrunner for Best Picture. Of course, if it's not, then this argument is out the window. But A Real Pain, which is clearly the runner-up, it's not The Substance, A Real Pain is the runner-up right now. That beating ANORA would join a group of only 3 other films since the 1960s, in the last 60 years. That's a bit of a gamble to go against. The other thing is, although ANORA lost the BAFTA, it did win the WGA against A Real Pain. It's not like A Real Pain wasn't eligible. It was there and it lost. So I got curious and figured out how many times in the 21st century has the WGA winner lost the Oscar to something else WGA eligible. And it's happened 4 times. Can You Ever Forgive Me won the WGA while Black Klansman won the Oscar. Up in the Air won the WGA. As I said before, that was a sweep. And Precious won the Oscar. Then American Splendor won the WGA, while Return of the King won the Oscar, that of course being Best Picture sweeper. And You Can Count on Me won the WGA in 2000, while Almost Famous won the Oscar. So 4 times there has been a WGA winner that has then lost the Oscar to something else WGA nominated. 3 of those examples, the WGA winner was not Best Picture nominated, while the upset was Best Picture nominated. So to me, ANORA having the Best Picture nomination and the WGA is much, much stronger.
And I would agree with you. I have Anora here. I think there's been so many people trying to say that Anora's strongest category is Best Picture. I still think, despite it losing at BAFTA, despite it losing at Critics' Choice, this is Anora's safest place all night. Watch us cut ahead to Sunday, and it loses to A Real Pain, The Substance, The Brutalist, or September 5. But like, I don't know. I just feel like when you watch Anora, that is a screenplay movie through and through. You walk out of that film like, this is Sean Baker's Oscar to lose. And like, it would be a different discussion if A Real Pain made Best Picture, because I think the biggest asterisk to a lot of those older comparisons that you gave to was those weren't year of 10s. If it was a year of 10, would Almost Famous be in Best Picture? Probably. And like this year, there's a year of 10, and A Real Pain missed out to stuff like I'm Still Here and Nickel Boys that had everything fighting against them. And A Real Pain had Searchlight, had an acting winner attached to it, and it still missed out. So like, I get like, oh, the nominations came out, they think Culkin's gonna win, they're gonna watch the movie, and they love the movie. But if Culkin was gonna win anyway, why weren't you watching it before to put it in Best Picture? So like, I have Anora here. I think this is one where like, sure, BAFTA is something to take serious, but I think it's going to lead a lot of people astray when it was Anora basically all along.
Yeah, it is notable though that ANORA has struggled so much to pick up wins in the screenplay category. It is very notable that that has been a thing, that even at the Critics' Choice Award, where it won Best Film, it lost screenplay. That is so strange. But at the same time, it would also be really strange for a film like ANORA to lose Best Screenplay to a non-Best Picture nominee. Like you were saying, never in a field of 10 has a non-Best Picture nominee beat a Best Picture nominee, slash, never has it happened, especially when that film is a front runner to win.
So I guess let's move us over to two pretty easy categories. And I mean, we just talked about Real Pain. Why don't we jump over to supporting actor, where Real Pain seems destined to win for Kieran Culkin? He has won everything. And when I mean everything, it's literally everything, because he even just won the Independent Spirit Award the other night, where you would feel like they would go with someone like Clarence Macklin or any of the other contenders in that category. But no, they still went Culkin. He's won it all.
Yep, there's no alternative. It's just Kieran Culkin. In the entire history of the SAG Awards since 1994, not one supporting performer has won all three of the Globe, the BAFTA, and the SAG and lost the Oscar. Never has a sweep been
Wow.
disrupted between if you have Globe, BAFTA, SAG as a supporting performer, and that goes for Zoe Saldana as well. Not once has that trifecta of wins led to an Oscar loss.
That is such a great stat. And that's why sometimes we do listen to the stats, because we jump over supporting actress. And I know there's so many people out there like, oh my gosh, Amelia Perez, it's so hated. People don't want to vote for this movie anymore. Listen to that stat. You got to go Saldana.
Yeah, you have to go Saldana. If you're going Ariana Grande at this point after SAG, I apologize. That is just coping with the inevitability that Amelia Perez is not that hated within the industry, that Zoe Saldana would lose with it. We got a sweep on our hands in both supporting categories. Like I said, if you win Globe, BAFTA, SAG, there has never been someone to win those three and lose. Of course, first time for everything, but it's not happening.
Our lead categories are kind of funnily enough like inverses of each other, of an older performance versus a younger performance. So, Matt, which one do you want to start off with here? Actor or actress?
I would love to start with actress because I think that this is a tighter race actually than the other category. I have been with Mikey Madison all year long. I was with Fernando Torres for a few weeks, but I'm back with Mikey Madison. I have never had Demi Moore, and I will not break from that. It seems like Demi Moore is far ahead. She has the Golden Globe, she has the Critics' Choice, she has the SAG, but she missed the BAFTA. Now, I looked into leading actors who lost the Golden Globe and then won the Oscar. And in the last 15 years, there's only been 4 people who lost the Globe and then won the Oscar. That's Brendan Fraser, Anthony Hopkins, Jessica Chastain, Frances McDormand. Also, all of these times, it's worth noting that their biggest competition was in the same category rather than the opposite. Think Brendan Fraser and Austin Butler, or Anthony Hopkins and Chadwick Boseman, both in Golden Globes drama. We don't get something like Emma Stone being neatly over there in Best Comedy Musical while Lily Gladstone's over here in drama. That often happens, and it allows there to be a race between the Golden Globe winners rather than 2 nominees. Then, after that, I looked. Since 2004, the winner has always won either BAFTA or SAG. The last time that someone did not win SAG or BAFTA in a lead acting category was 2003 Sean Penn for Mystic River. So with that, we can count out everyone that is not Demi Moore and Mikey Madison. Very sorry, Fernando Torres. There is a dark horse chance that you could win, but it would be a massive stat breaker. So at this point, we are just looking Madison and Moore, and alternately in the other category, Chalamet and Brody. Since 2010, when BAFTA and SAG split, I wanted to look at how often the win goes to the stronger film, the film that's closest to winning Best Picture, because I think that this is a very strong stat. And looking back at close races, these are races where one person has SAG, one person has BAFTA. 7 of the 10 times that has happened, where we've had a split between BAFTA and SAG in the leading acting categories, 7 out of 10 times, the winner has been from the stronger film, meaning we've got Gladstone versus Stone, Poor Things closer to picture, so Poor Things, Stone wins. Tar, Everything Ever All at Once, stronger film wins. The Father, Ma Rainey, of course, The Father, stronger. Nomadland, Ma Rainey, Nomadland, stronger. Over and over, this has happened. There have been 3 times where it has broken from that, and the weaker film has won. That is The Whale, where Brendan Fraser beat Austin Butler. The weaker film won. This also happened with Dallas Buyers Club and 12 Years a Slave, when Matthew McConaughey won with the weaker film, when Chiwetel Ejiofor had a Best Picture winning film. And the last one is 2011, Meryl Streep in The Iron Lady versus Viola Davis in The Help. Those are the 3 times when the weaker film has won. So between those three weaker films that won in a tight race, The Whale, Dallas Buyers Club, The Iron Lady, what is the common thread between those three films?
That's a great question. I actually don't know.
Makeup. A
Makeup.
makeup win. The Whale won makeup, and Brendan Fraser pulled off the upset in Best Actor. Likewise, Dallas Buyers Club won makeup, and Matthew McConaughey won Best Actor. Now, it's worth noting he was not nominated at BAFTA because the film was not eligible. He could have won at BAFTA, but still, for the sake of this, we're saying that maybe it was a race when it actually wasn't. In 2011, we had Streep winning BAFTA, Golden Globe, Viola Davis winning SAG. And of course, The Help was a stronger film, but The Iron Lady had makeup, and The Substance has makeup. So that's something on Demi Moore's side here. I also wanted to look at narrative versus non-narrative, because of course, Demi Moore has this great career narrative around her, while Mikey Madison does not. And of the above 10 close races, 7 of them had a component of narrative. And there's a 3-4 split. So 4 out of those 7 close races, the winner was the one that did not have a narrative. So I'm drawing from that there's really, narrative doesn't have a huge impact on these split races. And then because we have races between younger and older performers in all of these categories, I wanted to look at and evaluate the split between how many of these times the younger performer and the older performer won. And what I found there is that 4 out of the 10 split races, the winner was younger. So again, I don't think that there's much that we can really draw as a conclusion there. But I think with all of this, Demi Moore and Mikey Madison are neck and neck. On one hand, we've got a makeup stat. On the other hand, we have the link between the strongest film coming out on top. It's 50-50. Although more likely, I do think 70-30. Moore is definitely stronger in the race right now. And Mikey Madison is an underdog. Either way, I do think that there's a statistical improbability that happens here. I'm sticking with Madison because I'm sticking with my guns. I think ANORA is winning Best Picture, and I do believe in my gut, if you're closer to a Best Picture win, you are closer to an acting win.
I'm really lost of what to do inside this category because, like you said, they each have one major pro working for them, and they each kind of have a smaller negative working against them. Because, like, makeup and leading acting or any acting category is so strong. We see that year after year, and even in the inverse way of last year, it's like, well, I know you and I were both very strong for Emma Stone. Other people weren't, but we were like, well, will Poor Things win in makeup? And it probably won in makeup because of the correlation over to the lead acting category. Now this year, it's like, well, ANORA clearly seems to be the stronger film in Best Picture. So like you want to lean over to that way, but it's such a hard line to find because like there is a world, and this goes back to the Austin Butler versus Brendan Fraser category where clearly Elvis was the stronger film in nomination morning, but The Whale won 2 awards on the day of, and Elvis won 0. And I'm not predicting that because clearly I have ANORA and Screenplay, but like there is a world ANORA blanks and wins nothing, and Substance wins 2 awards, and you can make the argument, well, Substance were stronger the day of, it won actress, it won makeup, and ANORA won nothing. But like I just don't know what to do here, and I would feel so much better if Madison had something, whether it was CCA or it was SAG. I know the fact that she only has BAFTA is such a hard thing to overcome because looking at a lot of these comparisons so far, usually the person with the lone BAFTA isn't the eventual winner. I know that worked for McDormand and Anthony Hopkins that year. And again, that's probably because their films were stronger. So I think I am going with Madison at the end of the day, but it's something I'm going to be like back and forth with all week long until we hit Sunday.
But it's worth noting that that's because those are 2 out of only 4 people that have won
Mm-hmm.
a leading acting category without winning the Golden Globe. And I think something that's really worth noting right now is I don't think that it's 3-1 more to Mikey. I think it's 1-1 because we've only seen Moore win 1 award where she didn't have narrative. Before the Golden Globe, Demi Moore's narrative had not started. She won Golden Globe because of the performance alone. And after that, the entire conversation shifted after the Golden Globes. It turned from, well, Demi Moore gave a really cool performance to, oh man, she's been around for so long, we got to give her one. It changed. And SAG loves that type of narrative. Critics' Choice loves that type of narrative. We've seen it play out with those two. So Demi Moore won Globe without narrative. Mikey Madison won BAFTA without narrative. Now we're going to see them come head to head one more time because I do think that there was an unfair advantage at Critics' Choice and at SAG.
I guess I'll push back on that a little bit. I think part of her Globes win was to the fact that, hey, this is the first time she's ever been here. And I get that it was amplified a lot more after that win. And people are like, oh my gosh, this is a real possibility. We didn't know this was real before. But I think that was kind of looming in the air when the season was really kicking off at the beginning. But yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I have Madison here winning, and that's because of the stronger film in Best Picture. But like I said, if Anora, because usually screenplay is before actress, if Anora loses screenplay, Moore's going to win this.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you have to get the sweep for Anora, which hasn't happened anywhere yet. We haven't seen a single award where Anora has won everything it possibly could. So we'd be banking on the first time that that happens being at the final awards of the season. But still, I just want to go that way. I think that if Anora wins Best Picture, all of the other wins have to come with it this time. This isn't the Critics' Choice Awards.
And I feel you there. Sadly, though, we're gonna move over to Best Lead Actor, where I broke from my guns. I predicted Timothy Chalamet everywhere, and he kept losing. I was like, "Well, he's lost everything so far. He won't win SAG. He wins SAG." I don't think that's enough for him to come back to win the Oscar. But I mean, I think this is still sort of a conversation, and especially if Brutalist is going to struggle. Clearly, I don't have that allocated in my predictions from top to bottom, so I do have Adrian Brody here winning his second. But like the poetic justice to it all, if Chalamet's the one to beat him with such a bad precursor run, to take the title away from him to the same way that he won his last one. But I mean, Brody's got Golden Globe, he's got Critics' Choice, he's got BAFTA. And I think very similar to the Best Leading Actress category, just kind of flipped, is the fact that they went against each other at Golden Globes. And Moore won there, and Brody won here. But I think more so an actor than an actress. The winner was determined at that point. When Brody won Globes, the race was get off to the races. I know that's the opposite of what happened for Austin Butler. The biggest thing working against Butler was that was his first performance in a film that wasn't strong for Best Picture win, and the narrative and the overwhelming support for Fraser was just too hard to overcome. And well, I don't think Brody has the same sort of overwhelming support that Fraser had that year. I just feel like Chalamet needed something in addition to SAG. He lost BAFTA. He didn't win Globe. He didn't win CCA. And A Complete Unknown is honestly even weaker than Elvis was that year.
Yeah, this is an extremely similar race from Best Actress, but flipped. Because now we have Timothy Chalamet with one award and it's SAG versus Mikey Madison with one award and it's BAFTA. Now, Chalamet and Madison, they have opposite awards, but they both did, as you mentioned, they lost the Globe to their biggest competition who was in the same category. As well, both are younger and hypothetically could suffer from "we can award them later" syndrome, which we see time and time again. But the big difference here is that Mikey Madison is in the Best Picture frontrunner, while Timothy Chalamet is in a film that's fighting for fifth place. And another big difference is that Mikey Madison is competing against narrative, while Timothy Chalamet is not. There's no real reason why he should have lost, because again, we can say Demi Moore benefited heavily at Critics' Choice Awards and at SAG because they love awarding a career narrative. But Brody doesn't have that. He won the Critics' Choice without anything like that. So unless The Brutalist completely flops, if The Brutalist loses cinematography, loses score, then maybe A Complete Unknown is the stronger film. So in the case that The Brutalist blanks, then possibly Timothy Chalamet could win this award, which is similar to how Elvis crashed and burned at the Oscars, did not win costumes or makeup or cinematography or any of the things that were vaguely expected for it. And then The Whale slid in that gap. I'm going to stick with Brody because I don't believe that The Brutalist is going to flop that hard. I think that it won't perform overly well, but I don't think it's going to lose everything. And I'm sticking with my belief that in a close race, you go with the stronger film. And The Brutalist is the stronger film, but I would not be overly shocked if Timothy Chalamet wins, because I think that the difference in strength between The Brutalist and A Complete Unknown has shrunk in the past couple of weeks. But between these two categories, you just got to figure out your logic and you got to ride with it. If having the most awards matters to you, then it's Brody and it's Moore. If you think that one of SAG and BAFTA has more sway than the other, then it's either Brody and Madison or it's Chalamet and Moore. If you're saying, oh, well, BAFTA doesn't matter, then you have to go Chalamet and you have to go Moore. If you think that they're not going to go for a young performer, you go Brody and Moore. And if you think that the strongest movie wins in a close race in acting, then it's Brody and Madison. All you have to do, keep your logic consistent, And we'll see what logic ends up winning in the end.
And people always say the last award show doesn't matter when it's after nominations close. But what I think I always combat that with is the fact that, yeah, their speeches don't matter as much, but the fact that the voting body shows where their kind of heart is leaning towards, as my cat wants to walk through. Yeah, while Chalamet and Moore won this big award after the fact, it still shows that the acting branch is backing those two performances. Is that enough to overcome a lot of the extra stuff out there? Probably not, because I'm going against the two SAG winners and leaning towards the two BAFTA winners. I still think both of these races are a lot closer than some expect them to be. And obviously, you and I are kind of going the opposite of what the majority out there seems to be going.
Mhm.
Because, like, yes, the Brutalist probably could win up to 4 or 5 awards, and a complete unknown maybe maxes out at two. I still think it's more like 65-35, 60-40 if you want to put physical numbers on it, than like an 80-20, as I think some people out there think it is, or some people thought, oh, Brody's just gonna sweep the whole thing. And like Chalamet's always been here. It's just the hurdle of getting wins. And I just feel like his one win is probably the weakest of all of the precursors there are.
So, one thing I will say when talking about SAG is we have to keep in mind SAG has 160,000 members. The actors branch of the Academy has 1,258. That is less than 1% of people who are voting in SAG that are also voting for the Academy Awards. Less than 1%. SAG can show trends, but it's not the same voting body whatsoever. And it doesn't necessarily show acting support within the Academy because, again, that acting body within the Academy is 1% of the overall body of SAG.
Well, we have two awards left, so now let's dive into Best Director, where I feel like Matt and I are probably going to be the opposite here because I am going with the BAFTA winner of Brady Corbet. I know I've said all year long that people are going to be adverse to voting for him just because he's a new guy on the scene. They don't know him that much. His Q&As aren't always the most energetic and happy feeling. It's just, I don't know if I can, in good conscience, go with Sean Baker with solely a DGA award. And I feel like the BAFTA's coming in right before the deadline. And as well as, I don't think the Brutalist is as dead as I know that you do, because I still have it win in cinematography. And as I said in that category, the link there, if you have a winner, should usually line up. But I do think Baker is the number two. I've always expected that Corbet would not win the BAFTA. And the fact that he went on to win the BAFTA, even though his film didn't do awesome, but didn't do awful there, I think that he's going to edge it out here at the end of the day.
I don't know, man. I'm just okay. Before I get into everything, I just want to challenge you on something. You have a Nora winning screenplay. You
Mm-hmm.
have Mikey Madison winning actress. You have
Mm-hmm.
Sean Baker losing director. And based
Mm-hmm.
on that, I assume you do not have a Nora for Best Picture.
I think so. I haven't made the final decision yet, but
Okay.
that's the way I'm leaning.
If you don't have a Nora for Picture, you should not have Mikey Madison for Best Actress. I don't think. With the logic, if you're having it miss these top two categories, then I think that Mikey Madison slips as well. Anyways, director. Let's talk director. I don't think this race is particularly close, but let's say Anora loses picture. It would be pretty easy to imagine it losing Best Director as well. But however, Brady Corbet, despite winning two very key awards, it's been shown time and time again the film has been struggling to pick up steam with industry outside of BAFTA. It has one guild win total at the Society of Composers and Lyricists. It lost at SAG, it lost at DGA, it lost at ASC, it lost at ADG, PGA, WGA. It wasn't even nominated at ACE. It has lost everywhere, everywhere. Now, what I just said about SAG, that oh, it's like less than 1% of SAG is actually voting for the Oscar. You could probably find the same stats for like ASC or WGA or DGA. You know, there's going to be more directors voting in DGA than there are directors voting in the Academy. I don't know all of those numbers, but it's clear time and time again this movie has not been strong with industry, even if it feels like a much more typical directing winner than something like Anora. It hasn't been winning outside of Golden Globe and BAFTA. It has not won any industry awards, not just in directing, but anywhere else. So I want to look at DGA. DGA has correctly predicted the Oscar in all but 8 occasions stretching back to the 1940s. And only 2 of those 8 have happened in the expanded era. So in the last 15 years, the only directors that won DGA and did not win the Oscar were Ben Affleck and Sam Mendes. and Ben Affleck was not nominated for the Oscar and certainly would have won if he was nominated. But BAFTA has been wrong 6 times since 2009. And there has only been 2 times, 2 times in all of history, going all the way back to the start of BAFTA and DGA. Roman Polanski and Bob Fosse are the only directors that won BAFTA and lost the DGA and then won the Oscar. So you have to ask, is The Brutalist the Pianist in 2002? Is it Cabaret in 1972? As well, the Globes have been wrong 8 times since 2009. And both times that the DGA was wrong, the Globes were also wrong. So the Globes have never been right when the DGA is wrong. I think a really good comparable here is Birdman versus Boyhood. Boyhood had every single prize except the DGA. It had the Golden Globe, it had the BAFTA, and Birdman had just the DGA, as well as PGA, WGA, other guild support there. Now, the difference here is that Birdman was clearly a more flashy achievement. I think, in terms of films, you would look at Birdman and you'd look at The Brutalist as kind of more similar type of directing. But in the end, the DGA winner beat the BAFTA Golden Globe winner. And I think we're going to see that happen here too, especially if ANORA can win Best Picture. But I will also mention, and this is in The Brutalist's favor, for a while, cinematography and director had a link. In the expanded era, we've had 7 out of 15 winners being the same between cinematography and director.
I mean, maybe this is just a sickness in me talking, but I get the DGA stat and how insane that is and how it never breaks. But like, when has someone won DGA without anything else? Like DGA is their only award, and then they go on to win the Oscar. Because like at least
Birdman.
thinking off the top of my head, Birdman, he didn't win anything else.
I don't think he won. I mean, I'd have to
Okay.
check Critics' Choice, but I'm pretty sure Critics' Choice largely snubbed that movie outside of Michael Keaton.
That is very similar. I just don't know because neither of these people really feel like winners to me. But like there is no other alternative. But yeah, I guess Inarritu did just win just DGA for Birdman. I guess I just don't know what to do here because like they each have just major asterisks going against them. If Corbet just doesn't feel like someone who's ready to win yet, and that's kind of how I felt all year long. So it'd be kind of sucky to revert on that in the very last episode and then be wrong later that week. But then again, what Baker's doing for Anor doesn't line up with what they typically award in this category either. And he's only won DGA, and I get that if Inarritu did that too. But like Birdman, when you watch it, that feels like a directing movie, even if it didn't win anywhere else. But I don't know. I guess I'll switch over to Baker.
You could ride with it, but if you have a Nora winning picture, which I don't know if you do yet, then you kind of have to have it winning director too, which feels weird. That was never an award that I expected to go with Anora. You know, I thought that Anora was going to be screenplay, actress, picture. But it looks like if Anora wins Best Picture, it's with screenplay, actress, director, and picture.
Well, I guess let's go ahead and dive into Best Motion Picture. We got 10 nominees, and I would say 3 of them have a realistic chance of winning. We have Anora, we have Conclave, and we have the very, very weird world where the internet is right, and all those #1 votes for I'm Still Here to Get Inside Picture correlate to a Best Picture win. It's not happening, but like it's worth mentioning. It's the third most likely if you had to ask me.
I mean, we won't get into it. I'm just gonna say it's the films that have won at this point, and the films that have won are Anora, which took the Producers Guild Award, the Directors Guild Award, the Critics' Choice Award, the Writers Guild Award, and the Indie Spirit, which doesn't really matter, but still, it's another win. Versus Conclave, which took BAFTA and which took SAG. This is an incredibly tight race, but I think if I can be very clear, it is just between these 2 films. Now, Anora has almost all of the guilds, has one of the best packages, but even with a package that includes all of these top prizes, Critics' Choice, Producers Guild, Directors Guild, WGA, that's almost a guild sweep. It has struggled to get wins in crucial places. It has struggled. It missed director and picture and screenplay at BAFTA. It missed everything at Critics' Choice when it won Best Film. It has struggled. It has a package for a win that we would normally say is unstoppable, but it's probably the shakiest film of all time to have that package. I don't think there's ever been a film that has dominated as much as it has that is weaker than ANORA feels right now. And meanwhile, Conclave has two very strong wins, but it's missed some very crucial spots. For example, it doesn't have a directing nomination, which is a big hit against a film like that. Also, winning PGA would have been a big boost for that film. So, in a tough race like this, I'm going with what has won on a preferential ballot, which is ANORA. Now, I do just want to go into some stats, but before then, I'll just give you some space. Is there anything you want to add to that before I start rattling off stats about Best Picture?
I mean, it goes back to kind of how I've done this whole episode. It's a vibes thing, and I've said this from the beginning of the year, from when you saw it and described it, and throughout the large part of the season, and seeing how people react to this film firsthand. Anora hasn't felt like a winner to me, and I know it has all of this guild support. There's just something holding me back from being like, yeah, this is it. This is for real. And I guess with the correlation to the rest of my predictions of Madison, of Baker, of Screenplay, you kind of have to pick it for the Best Picture win. But I mean, like, maybe it's the Edward Berger effect. The Academy hates him director, but they always make sure that his film's number two in picture because BAFTA, SAG, that's a lethal combo. And like PGA would have made it unstoppable, but I feel like BAFTA and SAG honestly might be the best pairing you could have, maybe outside of PGA and SAG. I think they're pretty even to each other.
Well, let's talk about that. So, in the preferential era, looking in the last 15 years, here are the winners that won both BAFTA and the Oscar. The Hurt Locker, The King's Speech, The Artist, Argo, 12 Years a Slave, Nomadland, and Oppenheimer. That is 7 of the last 15 have won BAFTA and the Oscar. Now, Dylan, can you tell me what is the link between all 7 of those movies?
Oscar, the link between all those, they all
All
won
those.
direct?
They all
No,
won.
that's not
They
true.
all won BAFTA, and then they won Best Picture. But what else did they win?
They all won
PGA.
PGA.
They all won PGA. The last time that a BAFTA winner for Best Film won the Oscar without also winning PGA was Shakespeare in Love. And it's the only time that has happened. Every other time that a film has won the BAFTA for Best Film and then won the Oscar for Best Picture, it has always come with PGA. Every single time. Lots can be said about how terrible of a predictor BAFTA is on its own. In the expanded era, less than half of Best Picture winners have also won BAFTA. And like I said, all of them won PGA. And in that expanded era, there's only been 3 movies that won the PGA and lost the Oscar. That's Big Short, La La Land, and 1917. And notably, La La Land and 1917 also won BAFTA. Also, you say that BAFTA and SAG is a lethal combo, but let's look at the group that has won BAFTA and SAG. Conclave joins a group that includes Oppenheimer, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Argo, The King's Speech, Slumdog Millionaire, The Return of the King, American Beauty, Shakespeare in Love, The Full Monty. And notably, that group includes 7 winners of Best Picture, but every single one of those did it with PGA except Shakespeare in Love. Conclave has a very rare distinction, which is that it only has BAFTA and SAG. Only The Full Monty has that as well. And The Full Monty lost Best Picture. The other 2 films that have BAFTA and SAG but don't have PGA are 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which won the Golden Globe, and Shakespeare in Love, which won the Golden Globe and WGA. So Conclave is the only film outside of The Full Monty that just has BAFTA and SAG ensemble. All of that is saying Conclave winning is a big stat breaker. And that's why I'm sticking with Anora. It has won on preferential, and never, never has the PGA winner lost to the BAFTA winner.
Those are all super, super great stats. And I know I've referenced this a few times throughout the video, but it goes back to the Golden Globes starting off the season. People like to say the Globes don't matter. Who cares about the Globes? But they start narratives. They start the conversation. And I was projecting Conclave to be our Best Picture winner due to the fact that it would start its run of dominance at the Golden Globes. Go Globes, BAFTA, PGA. Clearly, it won one of those. It didn't win the other 2. And Anora, while it didn't win the Globe, it did win PGA. And it seems like both our Globes winners, chances to win Best Picture kind of out the drain because that's all that they have won, being Brutalist and Amelia Perez. So I guess ultimately at the end of the day, I'm sticking here with Anora, even if it doesn't feel right. The stats seem too right to overcome the vibes of everything else.
It is very interesting because despite the fact that these stats feel so ironclad, this is the weakest we've ever seen this. The weakest, weakest, weakest. But it also makes me think back, like, looking at this and how ironclad these stats are. I can't believe that I was predicting Parasite that year. I can't believe it. Like
It's a
if
vibes
this
thing.
year was 1917 versus Parasite, I would be like, there's no fucking way Parasite could do it, but it happened. So things
I
can
mean,
always
I
happen.
went 1917 and took the L that year, so
Hmm. Yeah, it's crazy because stats are meant to be broken. They are meant to be broken. There are always meant to be outliers. There are always meant to be things that change the way that we predict in the future. But right now, goddamn, Anora does look strong. But while it looks strong, it also looks really weak.
well, here's a fun thing, and this will be the last thing that we include in this episode because we've already gone super, super long. So we made this far in the video. Thank you so much for watching. But like every year, we talk so much about, oh, it's a competition that you go against. Last year, Oppenheimer steamrolled the year, arguable number two being Poor Things. And then the year before that, Everything Everywhere steamrolled the year, and arguable number two, All Quiet on the Western Front. What if we take All Quiet? What if we take Poor Things? And we place them in this year. And they're going against Conclave and Anora. And you can kind of pretend any way that the precursors go. Does Anora and Conclave still be the final two, or would All Quiet or Poor Things kind of swap into one of those places?
I don't think Poor Things would win. I think All Quiet, if Conclave is doing what Conclave is doing right now, All Quiet would be doing even more. But you also have to question, would we have a different precursor run for All Quiet? Because I think a lot of what killed All Quiet was that it didn't have room to grow. It just had BAFTA. There wasn't a chance for it to win PGA. There wasn't a chance for it to win DGA. There wasn't a chance for it to win director, or it couldn't grow into a potential Best Picture win. I think if you gave it the nominations across the board that Conclave has at every single guild, All Quiet would probably come out on top. In a year like this, All Quiet would have come out on top. Poor Things, I struggle with. I don't think Poor Things would have beaten Nora.
See, that's where I would probably disagree. Is I think that if we plucked Poor Things from last year, place in this year, and assuming that it still wins Venice, we could have a chance for it to win actress. Makeup, it's fighting with Wicked and costume production design. Maybe it loses its spots there, but then I think Yorgos Lanthimos would be stronger in the best director race, kind of taking that
Yes.
Brady Corbet slot. And at that point, you're number one or number two in director. You could maybe win adapted screenplay going against Conclave, maybe not. We'll have to see. We would have to see in that hypothetical how it would play out. I think it would be a combination of Anora versus Poor Things more so than Anora versus Conclave. And then, like you said, All Quiet versus Anora if you swap them out. So I guess that's ultimately leading me towards Anora is a stronger film. It would still withhold its strength there, but that is three adapted movies versus one US skewing original film.
Well, that will bring us to the end of our final predictions. Let us know in the comments, what are you predicting and what do you think we are furthest off on? Just let us know. We always love hearing what you have to say. And as always, thank you so much for watching. My name's Matt.
My name's Dill, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.